Imagine for a second the sheer, mind-boggling difficulty of changing a massive global institution. We're talking about organizations weighed down by deeply entrenched bureaucracy, constantly shifting political landscapes, and literal life-or-death operational pressures. Honestly, it sounds almost impossible, right? Well, welcome to this explainer. I'm your host, and today our mission is to decode the ultimate guide to institutional reform. We're looking at an absolute masterclass in change management, and we're pulling this directly from the United Nations Playbook on how to sponsor complex transformation.
So we have to start with a reality that haunts leaders pretty much everywhere. Why do organizational transformations actually fail? We see it all the time. Despite massive budgets, incredibly smart people, and these brilliant, glossy strategy documents, institutional change just kind of falls flat. It ends up being a temporary slogan rather than a durable, lasting shift in how work actually gets done. To answer that question, we are going to distill a remarkably dense, highly authoritative guide used by senior UN leaders. Now, the original source material contains exactly 50 distinct, highly strategic points for sponsoring change. That's a lot, right? But don't worry, we're definitely not going to just read a textbook to you today. Instead, we're translating those 50 complex concepts into a manageable, highly visual, and intensely human-centric playbook that you can apply to literally any complex organization. Okay, let's dive right into this. We've structured our explainer today into a clear, 5-part mental map. First up, the UN Transformation Challenge. Second, active sponsorship over ceremony. Third, protecting people during disruption. Fourth, aligning headquarters with field realities. And finally, measuring true institutional adoption.
So, let's kick things off with Part 1, the UN Transformation Challenge, operating in the pressure cooker.
Before we can even talk about how to change an institution, we really need to understand the environment where these lessons were forged. The UN environment makes change uniquely demanding. This isn't just about rolling out some new software system. Leaders here are operating amidst strict intergovernmental mandates, intense field security realities, severe resource constraints, and sheer humanitarian urgency, all while trying to maintain public trust. In a setting like this, a leader absolutely has to balance broad, sweeping ambition with strict legitimacy. Change here isn't a managerial luxury. It requires moral seriousness. You can't just mandate a new culture. You've got to build a literal bridge between your grand vision and the gritty, on-the-ground reality.
And that brings us right to Section 2, active sponsorship over ceremony, which is the inciting paradigm shift. This brilliantly illustrates exactly why most transformations fail, and it's a core thesis we really need to grasp today. Consider the ceremonial endorser. This is a leader who is passive, completely absent after the big launch town hall, and delegates the entire reform to a technical project team. Now contrast that with the active sponsor. This is a leader who is visible, accountable, constantly removing obstacles, and sustaining ownership through the messy middle of the project. The text makes it incredibly clear. Transformation doesn't just advance because a new strategy gets approved. No way. It requires sustained, active executive ownership. So, how does an active sponsor actually work in practice? Well, they use a chain of value. This is how abstract ideas become reality. An active sponsor doesn't just walk in and say, hey, we need to be more efficient. No, they take the high-level mandate need, connect it directly to a specific operating problem, define the enabling capability required to fix it, and finally, they lock in a performance indicator to measure it. By walking through this chain, leaders can easily answer the natural questions that staff always have. Why this change? Why right now? And how will we actually know if it succeeded? But here's the thing. A sponsor cannot do this alone. They absolutely need a coalition. Before ever announcing full implementation, a smart, active sponsor maps out the formal authorities, identifies the informal influencers, the people who actually sway team opinions, engages staff representatives, and connects with the end users in the field. And why do this so early? Because you want to identify risks and refine your assumptions before staff resistance becomes deeply organized. You want that shared ownership right from the starting line. Let's look at how this translates into actual execution. You don't just drop a massive reform on an organization all at once. That's a recipe for disaster. Instead, you sequence it through manageable waves. You group your activities by readiness and risk, launch an initial wave, learn from the inevitable mistakes, adjust, and only then expand the scope to the next wave. This kind of pacing prevents overwhelming the organization with simultaneous disruption, and it builds vital confidence along the way.
All right, let's transition into Section 3, protecting people during disruption. This is all about human-centric change.
This right here is the first major pillar of execution. focusing intensely on the human element and staff dignity. Transformation simply cannot treat staff as passive recipients. As the playbook points out, distinguish between destructive obstruction and valuable warning signs. Convert resistance into diagnostic intelligence. I love that. It's such a powerful reframing. When staff push back, it's rarely just noise or stubbornness. Usually, it is vital data highlighting a gap in your design or a deficit in trust. A great sponsor listens carefully, categorizes those concerns, and responds with better design, not just louder messaging.
But to actually get that diagnostic intelligence, you absolutely must establish psychological safety. This means creating a climate where staff feel genuinely encouraged to report issues early. Think about it. If accountability turns into fear, people are just going to hide their mistakes. And hidden mistakes? They eventually escalate into massive institutional failures. A successful sponsor ensures that learning never becomes an avoidance of responsibility, but rather a safe, essential tool for continuous improvement.
Which naturally leads us to Section 4, aligning headquarters with field realities, creating systems that actually work.
Now, what's really interesting about this is that great ideas born in a safe headquarters office have to actually survive the gritty practical realities of field operations. This means avoiding a trap that almost every organization falls into, which is digitizing inefficiency. True digital transformation isn't about slapping flashy technology onto a fundamentally bad process. That just moves your bad habits onto a much more expensive platform. Real sponsorship demands process simplification first. You have to review the workflows, cut the unnecessary approvals, reduce the manual burden, and only then apply the digital tools to accelerate that streamlined process.
And you've got to test those newly streamlined processes in the harshest environments. I mean, if a headquarters policy requires high-speed internet and uninterrupted focus time, but your field workers are facing weak connectivity and urgent crisis pressure, well, your policy's going to fail. Active sponsors test their assumptions against the hardest realities first. This allows for disciplined, contextual adaptation without losing the core standards of the reform.
Finally, we reach Section 5, Measuring True Institutional Adoption, which is all about the long game.
Measuring adoption is really about how you manage momentum and avoid totally burning out your team. Change fatigue is a genuine implementation risk. It's not just a lack of commitment. If your total volume of change initiatives towers over your staff's actual capacity limits, your reform will collapse, period. A sponsor must map the total change load pressing down on their people, and they've got to have the courage to deliberately pause non-essential projects to protect staff energy for the transformations that truly matter.
And when we're trying to figure out if those critical transformations actually worked, we have to look way beyond just ticking a box for completing an implementation. True institutional adoption is measured across 5 key areas: usage, compliance, satisfaction, behavioral evidence, and service outcomes. Are people actually using the new system? Are they complying with the new rules? Are clients experiencing better outcomes? If the change isn't being lived out in routine daily work, it hasn't truly been adopted.
So the crucial point really boils down to your transformation legacy. A legacy isn't the number of meetings you held or the shiny frameworks you produced. Actually, it occurs when capabilities, behaviors, and trust continue to function and improve without constant personal intervention from the sponsor. The ultimate measure of your sponsorship is what remains functioning long after you leave your post.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a provocative question to consider for your own leadership journey. Does your organization merely implement activities, or do you truly adopt new behaviors? It's an absolutely critical distinction. True transformation requires visible ownership, immense respect for the people weathering the disruption, and the discipline to see it through to true adoption. Thank you so much for learning with me today, and I really hope this empowers you to champion meaningful, human-centric change in whatever organization you serve.